Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. So I was reading an article written by Barry Shuck on, I believe, Dogs by Nature, and it made me think about if the Browns are going to trade for a wide receiver, right? And I'll make sure I link the article below, but it's called "An Andrew Berry Special. Browns Making Another Wide Receiver Trade Could Be Huge for the Offense." It's an article on Dogs by Nature from Barry Shuck, and I think he did a great job on it. It made me think, what do the Browns realistically need to do to reach their goals this year at the wide receiver position? And I think everybody looks at the Browns wide receiver position and sees that it's obviously not the strongest position on the team. Now, I tend to think that there are a couple of things that people don't factor in when they're doing this exercise. First thing is that the Browns will be throwing the ball less. Now, that doesn't mean the Browns won't throw the ball at all, but they'll be throwing the ball less. Usually when Kevin has what he wants on offense, in the running game especially, Kevin's balanced run pass. He's usually 500, somewhere in that range of splits, right? So let's say Kevin gets his way, the run game is good enough to get 500 touches, and we're looking at 500 and 500. If the run game is not good, then you're talking about having to throw the ball 600 times, and that's where this wide receiver room is really going to get you in trouble. And it's why I think the Browns should really consider maybe adding one more running back, not named Pierre Strong, to this team, because right now I see a team that can maybe run the ball 420 times. I don't know if they can get to 500. So 500 pass attempts, that's what their goal is. They want to keep it around that number. They could be a little bit above, they could be a little bit below, but 500 is going to be the general goal for the Browns passing offense this year when it comes to dropbacks and pass attempts. So when you look at that number, 500, it seems like a lot. How do you get the ball? Who's going to get the ball on offense in the air 500 times, or which guys are going to get which opportunities, right? We know that Jerry Jeudy's going to be good for about 120 to 150 targets, right? If he's healthy, he'll get that range of targets. Whoever's wide receiver 2 is probably going to get 100. You have to imagine David Njoku's going to get 100 as well, and already we're at 350. Whoever's wide receiver, well, then you're thinking the Browns are going to run a lot of twin tight end this year, so 60 to 80 targets for whoever is tight end 2, likely Harold Fainin, which brings us to about what? Low end 410, high end 430, and then you got 70 miscellaneous targets to spread out against everybody. So one of the things that you have to factor in is that in the pecking order of things, the Browns will have Jerry Jeudy, then David Njoku, then they will have whoever's wide receiver 2, likely Cedric Tillman, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Then after Cedric Tillman, it's probably going to be tight end 2, Harold Fainin Jr., who they drafted in the 3rd round. So we're really talking about not a 3rd option. We're talking about a 5th or 6th option when the Browns need a wide receiver, because that's kind of how the opportunities are going to be divvied up. They're going to need some guys to walk in with depth and fill in if there's an injury. But the Browns are, I think, okay to an extent going into this season with a bit of a top-heavy approach at the wide receiver position, because they are understanding that, hey, look, we're going to trot out a flawed roster this year. This is not one of those years where we feel like we're in the middle of a Super Bowl run or a Super Bowl window. We feel like we're rebuilding, you know what I mean? What the strategic pivot is what Andrew Berry calls it. And you're understanding that there's going to be certain flaws on the roster that you hope you don't exacerbate during the course of a season. What would prompt the Browns, knowing that they're not really trying to be in a situation to throw the ball to trade for a wide receiver? I see a couple of reasons. Number one on that reason list is what I've mentioned with the run game, where the Browns are relying on a lot of rookies to run the football, and they're relying on a lot of rookies for a lot of production right now. Now, some people have posed that the Browns will run Quincy Junkins 250 times. They'll run Dylan Sampson 100-something times, 150 times, and they'll run Jerome Ford 100 times, and that's how they get to 500. I have my doubts about that until I see Quinshon in pads, until I see Dylan Sampson in pads. I cannot just say that's going to happen automatically. But some people think that's going to happen. I have my doubts. And if my doubts are correct and the same as the Cleveland Browns' doubts, then maybe they're thinking to themselves, okay, so we're not going to be able to go 500-500 run pass split. Maybe we could go 400 and then 600 run pass split, trade for another wide receiver, and that's where you would make the value of it, getting another wide receiver that'll get about 100 targets this season. Now, if you were to go down that route, the only real option is something that Barry Shuck in that article did bring up, which is Terry McLaurin, right? Now, for those of you who don't know, Terry McLaurin's in the middle of a contract dispute with the Washington Commanders. It's kind of surprising given how important he was for that team last year, but he's in the middle of a contract dispute. I think this is something that it seems like a no-brainer for the Commanders to settle, but it would have been a no-brainer to not get it to this point. We know Andrew Berry loves to spin the block. And he loves to trade for wide receivers. He's had great success trading for wide receivers over the last couple of years. Jerry Jeudy, Amari Cooper. And then adding a guy like Terry will alleviate a lot of pressure from what is a really rookie-heavy run game and allow you to kind of give those guys the appropriate amount of targets. Think about it, too. Washington has drafted a lot of wide receivers recently. They traded for Deebo Samuel, which Barry brings up in his article, which might make McLaurin a luxury that they can't afford at that point, and they're looking to move off on. Now, Terry's probably the oldest wide receiver I would want to go after, and the reason I would want to get Terry is because I think Terry is really good to have as a veteran wide receiver, especially if you're going to try out a lot of young quarterbacks. Maybe that's where they're leaning. He is 29. The downside to trading for Terry is that by the time you're ready to hit your next window, there's a good chance that Terry's not going to be in his prime anymore. He's been a consistent 1,000-yard guy his whole career, but that's the one concern you trade for him. He might be at a downturn of his career. He's going to be 30 next year. For a team that does not have a championship window in the foreseeable future right now in Cleveland. It would primarily be a move to try to elevate the floor of your offense to make it easier to develop a quarterback. By the time that quarterback is developed, though, there's a good chance that Terry's probably not going to be super useful for you. But maybe that's something that you can consider, because I do think the Browns are going to want to give Cedric Tillman a lot of targets this year. I think Cedric's going to get at least 100. The reason I think Cedric's going to get 100, and the reason I'm not a big fan of trading for any of the Green Bay wide receivers, are kind of one and the same. So there's been noise about the Browns trading for these Green Bay receivers, right? Dontavion Wicks, Romeo Dubes, and Christian Watson. Automatically, Christian Watson, I don't think the Browns would be interested with him. They weren't very interested in him in the draft. He's an older wide receiver. He doesn't really fit the archetype of what the Browns like. Dontavion and Romeo fit that more clearly. Romeo, I have a hard time believing the Browns would be that interested in him, given that he's on the last year of his rookie contract this season, which means the Browns will have to pay him. The one guy I think they could have interest in is Dontavion Wicks, but I don't know if the Browns would move Greg Newsome or something like that to get the Dontavion. Because at the end of the day, he's like a 400, 500-yard receiver guy, right? And that's not super valuable, right, in the league. And then they also have Cedric Tillman. Now, the reason I think the Browns are going to be very interested, very peaked by Cedric Tillman is because of what Cedric Tillman did once he finally started getting opportunities in 2024. Now, remember, the first 6 weeks of the season, Cedric Tillman only got 5 targets because of Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy and how that kind of clogged up the room. And then the awful performances you were getting at quarterback at that time as well. But from week 7 to week 11, he was very productive. In those 5 games, had 3 touchdowns, 330 yards on 44 targets, 26 receptions. If we were to average out this production for a full 17-game season, that's 150 targets, about 188 receptions, 1,122 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Not saying that that's what you should pencil Cedric Tillman in for this year, is that kind of production. But I do think those splits justify you really giving Cedric Tillman a look, a really strong look, 100-plus target look this season. And I think Cedric's going to get 100-plus targets this year. So when you think of it like that, right, the Browns have their number 1. It's going to be Jerry Jeudy. They have their number 2 option in David Njoku, a Pro Bowler. Those 2 are going to get the ball a ton this year. And then if you're wondering who's wide receiver 2, I think it's obviously going to be Cedric Tillman. So the Browns, the way they look at it, their top 3 options at pass catcher, they're not really concerned about. And then they have Harold Fainin Jr. coming off the bench as tight end number 2. He's going to get the ball. There's really not the same amount of need for wide receiver bodies in this offense as there was in the Ken Dorsey offense, where you're a little bit more spread out, running empty more often. Depending on what they think of Jamari Thrash, he might be somebody who can get out there and get some touches. Maybe Deontay Johnson makes the team, but I have my doubts about that at this point. And that's a video for another day for sure. But I think the Browns are likely to stay pat at wide receiver unless something big comes across their desk. I don't think they're going to make a move for any of the mid-level guys like the Green Bay guys. I think they would only make a move for something big and young and somebody they would sign in free agency if they were available, right? So if we're looking at the Andrew Berry archetype, somebody under 27 years old, somebody who's been very productive. That's the big trade they make. If they make a small trade, it's going to be for somebody who's like a former first, second round pick who's still under 25, 24 years old, right? I think like Treylon Burks, right, if he becomes available, would be somebody Andrew Berry would throw a flyer to if the Deontay Johnson thing doesn't work out. But I don't think that they're looking at this saying to themselves, we need to get another wide receiver that we're going to give a bunch of targets to. I think they're saying to themselves, we're at the point where we're fine with what we're going to throw out there. We're just going to get some guys in to fill in the blanks. And I think when you're looking at the Browns wide receiver need from that perspective, it changes a little bit. Now, this is not to say that I think the Browns wide receiver room is awesome, that they're going to put up these great numbers. I don't think the Browns are going to have an amazing passing attack this year. I don't think the Browns are going to be in the top half of the league in passing efficiency this year. I don't expect the Browns to be in the top half of the league in passing efficiency, but I also don't think that's the Browns' goal this year, and that's part of the reason I don't think they're going to trade for a wide receiver. They're not trying to be an amazing passing offense this year. They're trying to fix the run game this year. They're trying to be a great run game this year, right? And that's what their main focus is the run game. And that's where they spent a lot of their resources, is in the run game. They have made the conscious decision to be like, hey, we're going to give some guys some opportunities in the wide receiver room, but we're okay if we underperform there, because, again, how good does the Brown wide receiver room need to be to win what we're guessing is going to be, 7 to 10 games? You don't need to have the best wide receiver room in the NFL. We tend to look at rosters as this endless pursuit to have no flaws on your roster whatsoever. That's how we talk about it, because it gives you endless content if you talk about the roster like that. But the truth is, every roster is just going to have holes on it. Nobody has a holeless roster. Everybody's roster is going to have a hole in it. Good rosters have a lot of holes. Bad rosters have some holes. But every roster has holes in it. That's just what it is. And we talk about it as if like every hole can be filled. The Browns are looking at their roster and saying to themselves, we want to feel good about enough positions that if wide receiver is not a strength, we're okay with it. And I think that's how they're trying to build this team this year. We'll see how many games they win, and we'll see how successful the wide receiver room is, what they can get out of Cedric Tillman. But that's why I don't know if the Browns are going to make any moves. Now, the one scenario where the Browns would be aggressive to make a move is if one of these rookies takes the reins super early and goes on a Jaden Daniels type run before the trade deadline. Then, yeah, the Browns will be aggressive, get a wide receiver, and try to fill that hole. But if it looks like it's going to be a season where the Browns are, at best, struggling for the 6 or 7 seed, then I assume that they're going to be okay with just getting these young guys some touches. We'll see what they do. Make sure you go check out Barry's article. I think it's very interesting if you want to know more about why the Browns might make a move at wide receiver. I want to thank Barry and the Dogs by Nature for helping me out with this video. But y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.